Hello, everyone, and welcome to Classical Revolution here on IDAGIO. My name is Rachel Fenlon, and this is my weekly series in which I get the great pleasure of interviewing guests from the classical music world, people from sort of all corners of the classical music world, and speaking with them about what risk-taking is in classical music and how they push boundaries, their own boundaries within the art form. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Sarah Nemtsov. Sarah is a composer with a fascinating and unique musical voice. Her compositions include over 100 works for opera, orchestra, chamber music, solo instrumental, ensemble. She's won several prizes for her works. Last year, she was nominated for an Opus Classic as Composer of the Year. Sarah is based in Berlin, and she's represented and published by Ricordi. And this is actually the first time we're meeting today on the show, so I'm really thrilled to welcome her. Hi, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. Sarah, I'd love to begin by just asking what your earliest musical memories are and whether there are any particular musical moments that jump out for you as like really important moments for you musically.
Well, this is hard to say like a particular moment because I kind of grew up in a very musical house. My mother herself, she wasn't a musician, but she came from a musician's family. So she just liked music very much and it was very important for her. So she listened to music a lot and played the piano. We had a piano at home, a small one, and the viola, or she sang to me, but also the house where we lived in, our landlord, we were just living in the apartment above her, was a Baroque musician. She was a recorder player and she had a Baroque trio. And so there was just music in the house, and she was also my first teacher then. So, but it just kind of happened naturally. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was always kind of you couldn't really pinpoint specific moments because there was always music.
Yes, and also like I was very I reacted very strongly to music. In my very early childhood already, there were these stories my mother would tell me, like she went with me when I was a baby still, like with 1 year or something, to a ceremony of the baptizing of a friend's child. So there was some music in the service, and whenever the priest would start to talk and the music stopped, I would just really loudly complain and cry la la, my word for music. So I wanted the music all the time. And, yeah, so.
Oh, wow. Oh, so it started really early.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, but not with any goal or something. It was just, it was very playful.
And your education in terms of like becoming a composer, would you say it was quite traditional, or did you take quite a traditional compositional path up to a certain point? What was your education like musically?
I'm not sure if there exists something like a traditional path anymore at all, for a composer.
Sure.
Of course, studying at some point, but what is traditional? I think nowadays there are so many composers also coming from other, areas, also electronic music or whatever. So maybe mine was probably more traditional, since it happened, together with an instrument or something, and maybe quite early, but still I feel it's not so traditional. So I in this house, my first teacher, I just started playing the recorder, and also quite early started to be with them on stage. She was very old already, and she would be like 101 now. So their trio was already very old, and there was a very old harpsichordist already many years dead now. I loved him very much. He was a great musician. And at that time, it wasn't so, now, the early music is, very common, but at that time it was more special in the 80s or something. It wasn't, and they did it after the war. They had like 40 LPs and were quite well known at that time. So I started also to, when I played the recorder, I just tried to write down things, but it wasn't like a composition to me. I didn't think about it like this. And only when I was a teenager, it was more through some interest in jazz that my music, shifted. And maybe then with 13 or 14, I thought, yes, I'm composing something and I want to be a composer.
And when you kind of really wanted to become a composer and pursued that, were there certain composers that you gravitated more towards, or you felt you learned a lot from, even also later, in your 20s, 30s? I mean, which composers kind of speak the most to you or have spoken the most to you?
Oh, there are, of course, many, and from all kinds of areas and also periods. But then, of course, there at certain times in my life, there were like events that kind of shook me or changed something. So I remember it was often also women composers that were important for me. Also, maybe not only, I mean, of course, I love all the old music and all this, and also from living male composers. But there were these moments, I remember in Oldenburg, where I grew up in the 90s, the opera house did Adriana Hölzki's Die Wände, the opera, The Walls. And that was really some kind of an eclat in this city, because there wasn't so much contemporary music. And I remember the audience were really, noisy. People would walk out and slam the doors and everything. And to me, it was also, it was a shock, kind of, but a positive one. I was really like puzzled and fascinated. And there were these simultaneous scenes inside the opera, and I have still some very vivid memories of this. So this was something that I would think really shook me. But then also, since I was 14, I attended courses every year. First it was, now it's called Jugend komponiert, or like youth composing or something, where young composers are invited to Schloss Walkersheim in the south of Germany. And, the kids spend a week together with some professors, composers, and also musicians, and the pieces are being played and then you discuss together. That was very important to me, also to see other kids doing such strange things.
Right.
But I was also very lucky to have had a music teacher in the school after the 7th class who was really supportive, and he actually commissioned an orchestra piece when I was 15, my first orchestra piece for school orchestra, and he premiered it, and we're still in contact. And so he was, I was very lucky in that sense.
Yeah. It's so important to get those things also at this age somehow, because you're striving for different things. You're just completely exploring what that is, to compose for an orchestra or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've read, I loved discovering your work, preparing for this interview. And of course, I've already heard some of your work in the past. And I read, discovering you as an artist, that literature plays quite an important role for you as a composer. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, about what it is about that sort of, about the language of literature, and that sort of inspires you musically?
Yeah, these are, it's true. And then it's also that these are the sentences that somehow, are put in a biography and have its own life, kind of, because it's not only literature, it's also other arts and many, many things. But of course, literature is very important. And for me, it's just in other arts to see something really grand and radical and moving and sometimes also disturbing. It gives me an impulse to think, how could I translate it into my language and into my musical language, or what could it mean to me? It just, it can be totally different, whatever it is. It can be a moment. I'm just right now rereading some books by Peter Handke. And again, I'm so struck by his strong, powerful language that is also very free. For instance, in that the freedom is, for instance, very inspiring. That he really builds a new context. It's hard to describe, but and in other, with other literature, with other authors' texts, it's different. It depends. But then it's also other arts or painting or, other things, many things actually that inspire me and are important. But it's true. I have several works that kind of deal with literature. Also, it's now already 10 years ago. I wrote a whole cycle from 2010 to 11 that was like a musical reading of different texts to me without setting the text actually to music, but just, inside the music. So I try to, react to it. Of course, it's always very subjective, but these are, and I think it's not only in this cycle, but it just happens sometimes in my works, or sometimes I'm just, notating in my some sentences I read that are important for a piece, or I feel it, something clicks when reading something.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what you say also about, I like what you said about the freedom, because I think sometimes we need to see something in a different art form entirely to see where we might limit ourselves otherwise musically for some reason.
Yes.
Or not.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So you also write about this idea of exploring an urban sound. And I'm wondering if you could, I mean, what is that, first of all? Because I would love to hear what that is, and also how you explore it.
To me, it's on the one hand, I'm very interested in polyphony, and this is probably still, connected to my childhood and all the old music I listened to and was, confronted with and played myself. And also later in my studies, I was very interested in Renaissance, counterpoint, and things like that. I tried to study this more and go dive into this deeper, and it had a huge impact on my composition till today, I would say. And but I find this polyphonic or the polyphony I'm interested in, I find also in other, musical styles, or like also in jazz sometimes, or it depends. And so for me, the urban sound is polyphonic on the one hand, but then it has a certain chaos that, that just happens. And this is something I'm sometimes in pieces I'm looking for, how I can, create different layers that are on the one hand connected and also responding in a way, and also constructed. I mean, it's never, like improvisation or something, but then that they can have, their independency, and but they could also disturb the other sometimes, or moments like this, or that there's, all this noise that kills other sounds. This could happen also in my music, the sound killing another sound, but then also all the beautiful moments I hope to also embrace, and also the beauty of the city. But lately, especially the last year, I feel I'm looking for different areas in my music now, and it's more, I'm not so much interested in this anymore at the moment.
Do you think that this change came from the situation that we're in, where we're kind of at home all the time, and there's more quiet, or do you think it was affected by that in some way?
Yes, I think so. I mean, you never know, because I can't say how I would compose if everything would have happened that was planned, and the world would have been different. But I wrote a lot last year. Also like 2 orchestra pieces, several ensemble pieces, and all these all these pieces remained silent. So I had only like one premiere, and I wrote, I think, something like 10 pieces since last February, quite a lot. And on the one hand, I can say I'm lucky, because I still had the contracts and only the premieres were postponed. Whereas, I mean, so many artists had more existential problems then. So I had still the contracts, but then after a while, it was, of course, frustrating. But then at some point, I also felt maybe it's good to not listen to anything. And it was about letting go, and come to some kind of an essence, or the core of something. And so in the last pieces I wrote last year, it was the one was a song cycle only for mezzo soprano, viola, and piano. I really wrote only for these instruments, without electronics, without preparation, with texts by the German Jewish poet Hilde Domin, that are also kind of, I mean, they are sad also, or have a lot of pain. It's also about exile, but they have also a lot of hope, and they need only a few words. It's very minimalistic in a way. So, or I don't know, minimalistic is probably not the right word for her poetry. It's just very, it's just the essence.
The essence. I was gonna say that. Okay. It's interesting. It's interesting to talk with you in this exact moment, where you realize that so much can change in 1 year. I mean, and so much. It must. We all have our experiences through this experience, this crisis, but for a composer, I mean, in many ways, you can still. I have some also composer friends in Berlin, very good friends, and in a way, you can still kind of do your practice. So it's more about observing to what's changing around you.
But then, of course, the connection to the musicians, I'm missing that really very much. And you want to. It's not for the paper what I'm doing. I want to reach out. I want to. But everyone wants that, of course. I mean, you don't want to practice for your room, or So that's it. But we have to probably trust and be just patient, and hopefully will be better times then. But also maybe it's you see what is really important to yourself, and that's probably a good thing.
I think so. I would definitely agree with you. And I've also had other guests on the show, and we've talked about this, and it's kind of the thing that keeps coming up actually. What you gravitate to when everything is taken away, and what actually is calling to you or making your heartbeat fast. I wanted to talk to you about a couple of genres or forms, because you do so many things well. Like, so it's amazing that you write operas and orchestral pieces and these very small scale piano works and kind of everything in between. And I wanted to ask you about writing an orchestral work, because sometimes for me I feel this can be the hardest, aside from opera, one of the hardest sort of forms, and because we've evolved so much, but the actual orchestra maybe not as much. And so I wanted to ask you, where do you think innovation lies in writing orchestral music? And yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, it's a good and tough question. I mean, first of all, the orchestra itself is, how can you invent? I would love to invent my own orchestra. I mean, it would certainly not have this setting with, two flutes, two oboes, and so on and so on. Already the instrumentation is something, from some other times, and is loaded, and so it's very I mean, you have to deal with it already first, in the first place, that it's not from the 21st century. And of course, then you can, add things, some electronic or whatever, to, to be more in the present, probably. But is it really the true innovation? I don't know. So that's, of course, whatever I'm questioning this myself. I think I tried with every orchestral piece I wrote a different approach to this. In one piece, for instance, I tried to also question the hierarchy and the relationship between conductor and musicians in the orchestra. So there are some passages where it's not it's notated in a freer way, but it doesn't mean it's an improvisation. It just has no measure anymore. So it's not the conductor would give bars or whatever, but also the conductor would sometimes more react to some signs. Musicians, sometimes the musicians give the conductor signs, and also the conductor would play a toy piano, and so the musicians react to this, to some sounds. They have to listen more and not and watch less, I would say. And but this is, of course, difficult for an orchestra that is not used to it. So by now it was played quite a few times, and the reactions were always very different from orchestra. And well, I won't talk about audience, but in the orchestra there were these players that were really excited, like they could finally do and try out and be more active, and then others that were kind of don't like it and even refuse kind of to play, but or just do it very, very basic, so it's not a real playing anymore. But that's just an experience. It's good. And I mean, the pieces are also abstract in a way. I mean, there are different interpretations possible, and well, it's in the air somewhere, the piece. It's somewhere between, I would say.
It's interesting to question, I mean, because you're right, like the actual structure of the orchestra, it can't really be, it's not that you can create your own orchestra, and it can't be sort of pulled into this century. So it's interesting to question things like hierarchy, or roles within the orchestra. I'd never thought about that before.
Yeah,
You just said that.
Yeah, I have in another orchestra piece, for instance, I mean, this is nothing too new. I mean, Ives did it, and many other composers did it to just play with the space and so on. But for me, it's just also to question myself, like, what do I really need? So in another orchestra piece I wrote in 2017, it's called Drop Drowned. For instance, in the beginning, I felt I don't want to have some oboes and trumpets in this piece. Because I mean, oboe was my instrument. I also studied oboe, and I decided to stop playing 2007, long ago now already, to focus on a composition only. But of course, it's a very dear and very personal color for me. And but in this piece, I felt I don't want it, and so I abandoned it. And I started composing, and at some point, quite late in the piece, the piece wasn't supposed to be too long, but I wrote it then much longer than it was supposed to. I felt, well, now I could use it just as a, like some windows. And so I decided to have the oboes and the trumpets, but from far, from behind the audience, and mixed with some sound files, so that the color is kind of blurry and you don't really recognize it as such. It's there, but at the same time, it's behind a veil or something. And so these are things this is nothing big, but for me, it's a small innovation for my own composition, probably.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would love to speak to you about your work with opera. And so you're working right now on your 4th opera, is that right?
It's actually, it's my 3rd big opera. There will be a 4th,
yes.
very likely also afterwards. Can't speak about that yet.
Okay.
And I have 3 chamber operas also. So it's my 3rd big opera now.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's called Ophelia?
Yes.
Set based on the Shakespeare text, right?
Yes. Yes, it's that was given by the Opera House Saarbrücken. It's a Saarländisches Staatstheater, because they have this series of Shakespeare operas. I mean, now through Corona, everything upside down anyway. But at least that was the plan, to have 3 different Shakespeare operas. So this is what often happens anyway. You are given a certain setting or instrumentation, like orchestra instrumentation, and then you have to find your way how to find something unique for yourself and authentic, and to be honest with it. And so of course I do love Shakespeare, of course, but then the question was, what can I do with it? My last big opera was Sacrifice, 2017 in Halle premiered, and it had a very, current topic with radicalization, and, also while there was this, I don't like the term, but I don't know how to call it otherwise, the refugee wave, as it was called here in Germany, and all the different aspects. So that was the last big opera. Although for me it was also important that the topic could be in a different time, so it's kind of timeless. But then going back to such a sujet, Shakespeare, that it and it's also very loaded, and it was difficult to find something. And I just had this thought of Ophelia, because to me this figure was always something very annoying, because she's manipulated by
as a woman.
As a woman, she's manipulated by mainly men, but also women. I mean, the mother, and treated badly. And then she commits suicide. Why? I just think it's totally stupid. And I mean, you could think about.
And she goes crazy too.
Yes, also that's both. She goes crazy or is supposed to be crazy. I mean, who says what means crazy? With these men, I would be
Right.
crazy as well. Or who's crazy here? I mean, is Hamlet crazy or whatever? But she's supposed to be the crazy one, the crazy female that is also poet. And I think this is very that's for me what is interesting and also very modern in a way, or a very important topic. How the perception of the female in it's a huge topic. We could talk years now, but if you think also about women, like in the 20th century, or even before, artist women who were, supposed to be crazy, mad, insane. Really, were they, or were they just, out of what was supposed to be the commonplace for a woman, or how she had to behave, or where she had to fit, or was it just, all the situations that made her go this way because she had no other choice, probably? I think it's a very, very interesting, thing to think about also. What and to me personally, I mean, I'm now a female artist in the 21st century, and I think of all the women who have fought for us. I mean, it's still not far from equality, but we are in a much better place than, let's say, 100 years ago or even before. So all the women who have fought for us, I hope this opera will also be a bit a tribute to them, but then also Ophelia will have several Ophelias, and one will survive. And just so, I asked a friend and poet and writer Mirko Bonnet. We've worked together already. He's living in Hamburg, and he just his new roman, how do you say, his new novel just appeared a few days ago, and he wrote many novels, poetry also. I really love his poems. I set some into music, but also he's a translator, and as a young man he has translated the whole Keats from English to German. This really
amazing,
big work, and he got also prizes for that. But it's not about prizes, that they don't count, but of course they sometimes they are nice. But he has a very, very unique approach also to this older language. So I asked him to do a new version of this Hamlet Ophelia, and to have several Ophelias, and he wrote the libretto, and I'm really excited. I got it some time ago, and it's I think it's to me it's very inspiring. And he wrote in verse. How do you say in verses? In verse, which is kind of not usual nowadays. This is kind of innovation in a way to me, because I wouldn't have thought about this myself. That would be probably the last I would think of, to have a libretto now in verse. But he wrote in a very beautiful and also unique language that he has. So I will start this soon. Okay. Or I'm already starting, but I'm still in a process of collecting and working towards writing the actual score.
Well, that was going to be my next question, was sort of where does the process, I mean, the process must be huge, but I'm curious where it begins for you when you get a work like this, a huge opera. So you said it starts with collecting, and
Yeah, it takes time, but also a lot of time to just think and let it sink in, and be kind of open and be not judgmental. Just be open and feel what is right, what is interesting, what I need to, what I probably want, you know, and just collect this without judging first. And then, I have to kind of swim through this and see, where I see some light, and, just sort this out, kind of this mess. So I'm first creating a mess, and then I'm kind of, getting through this jungle kind of. So, but this is very, very important to have it a long time, kind of subconscious also, like in some edge of the brain. And this is, already, I don't know when I first got the idea of Ophelia. I mean, I got the commission.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a year ago, I think, that that I start thinking, and all this, and now I'm about to write, and then it will probably be a year or something for such a huge work.
Yeah, sure.
But an opera is something very different from other works. I mean, there it also is, for me, it's always that I probably need some time just to have it inside my head. And then if I know what I want, I can write quite fast. And, I have my sketches, or, some works are also very strict, or some are maybe more spontaneous. Some are more, you feel you're more struggling, or the material is, like a, some plants in a room, are easy. Some you struggle with, and they kind of look, they're almost dying, or very dry and ugly. But then, someday there's a flower or something, and you're, what happened to that? But, probably you shouldn't, at some point you have to throw away, but sometimes you also have to be patient or perseverant.
Yeah, both. Right. Wow, it's so exciting for you that this is happening. And it's, I mean, not to reiterate what you already said, because you said it so well, but it's really important to tell these stories, and kind of retell these narratives of what a female experience was in the past. I think it's really important work. So on a more objective scale, I would just love to hear what do you feel opera, music theater opera, is in the 21st century? Like, what do you think the strength of opera is? What can it do? What is its sort of power?
Of course, I think always opera has this, just these qualities, that it speaks to so many senses, and it involves so many art forms, different art forms, and it has also like a big time. It's not only, like a, the usual 15 minutes contemporary music piece within a program, either of other contemporary music pieces, or as an, as the new music piece in a classical program. It's if you can, I feel really privileged to, to write, such a big work for orchestra, many singers, choir, electronics, to have this, to have a space, to have other artists working with me as the librettist, but also then, of course, stage design, director, costume. I mean, there's so maybe, video or whatever. Also now the new technologies, they also open whole new rooms. I'm also now very interested at the moment. I mean, I don't know if it will play a role in the opera, but just, stepping into this, more with the virtual reality and augmented reality to, to find like hybrid, whatever artworks with music and visuals that are kind of hybrid. Like our world is also very hybrid. Like now, we are not sitting in a room, but there are good. It's also exciting. It's also sometimes frustrating, or it's not the same, of course. But all these opportunities. An opera house or an opera or music theater could give you, of course, also many limitations then, or just the how the weight of a institution, that's also something you have to deal with. And sometimes if I'm just writing a small solo piece, I feel like a butterfly, or I can just do whatever I want in this moment, and then either it goes somewhere or not, or someone plays it or not, and I don't feel this responsibility. It's also, I feel pressure, of course, or it's it's wonderful, but it's also very difficult, and I'm I'm questioning myself, and I just hope I can live up to my own expectations first. The other expectations, we'll see. But
no, I like what you said, that it's kind of like it gets, usually we hear new music, or it's so often either because we've gone to a specific new music concert, or that it's in the context of a classical concert, or it's just a few minutes, but it's that you get to create this whole world that exists, like a
it's more like an experience than like I mean, this term is often used now, immersive, but I mean, this would be something I would so hope to create, or whenever I go to an opera, if I'm lucky, it happens. I have to confess also that I have my problems with opera, because it's also a very strange, and sometimes I feel even absurd art form, and or unwillingly funny sometimes, or all this mannerism, or it can be kind of weird also.
Totally.
Yeah. So sometimes in a good sense, and but sometimes also just in a very strange way, that it's not. I'm probably fascinated, but I don't always like it. It's just sometimes I feel. But this is maybe why I'm interested in my own work, because there's this controversy inside myself towards opera. And that's probably what is, what is interesting then.
Definitely. I'm curious, do you feel, as a composer in general, do you feel that you're quite, or that music can be political? Do you feel that you have done more what you would say political works? Where do you kind of fall on that idea of music being political in some way?
Yes and no. On the one hand, I think music, or every art, is cannot be not political in a way, because it's always an expression of a human. And I think as a human person, we are always in this context that, political is also very broad. What does it mean? It's not only the politics, like the politicians do, somewhere above, but politics are also, everywhere. And also but then also the art can be a freedom of this. And this is also like political, because if you're free from it, it's also, then it has a political meaning. like I think Schopenhauer said something like if I remember correctly, like in the art you are free from all the human wills that are, you know, kind of enslaving us, and in arts you can be free of this. So I think if there is something some utopia inside it, and something very beautiful, something powerful. But then, of course, art can be political, and it can, you know, transport messages, or, you know, like show things, or create maybe some awareness of a topic. I mean, music itself is just, you know, is free, and I love it for it. And but then I have some pieces that I would say are political myself, like the Sacrifice, what I mentioned. Also other pieces, opera pieces, but also the last years twice I worked with film. One was it's called Red, and it was a collaborative work with choreographer Heinrich Horwitz. And it was about female menstruation as a metaphor for hidden pain. So there is, but I wouldn't say that I would transport a message or something. It's rather that there is maybe with the music, and maybe also then other art forms like film in this case, you know, you can maybe open a specific space for some more associations than only musical ones. But not like a program music, but rather than maybe you could think about this, or this, and maybe you get some question marks through this. This would be what I hope.
Right.
And you know, the other work was about an Indian girl living in New Delhi, close to a landfill. So it was about also the ecosystem and poorness, many different problems. She's basically living from the trash, but there are also other things behind, because she's actually quite a happy child. And so it's to me this questioning is important. And you know, some pieces have maybe a more concrete subject or some things, others have nothing, or you know, have some inspiration that may be concrete, and I could, you know, write in a program note about it as a subject, or as a, you know, that's my statement, or that's my message. I could do this, but at the same time it's not important, because for me also always, whatever I do, there's also only the music important. So if I write such a thing like Red, or also only the music, for me at least myself, needs to make sense. So it's maybe like on the larger scale, if you think of the polyphony, we talked about it earlier, where the voices can be independent and should make sense. Of course, it's not the same, you know, if you have a Invencio by Bach, you know, if you leave out one voice, it's not the same, but it, you know, it tells you something already. And yeah, this is maybe also, if you have a polyphony, not only of the different musical structures, but you can have this polyphony also with, you know, other art forms. This is for me important also in music theater, that it's not just, you know, an illustration or some decoration, because this also, if you take the new technologies now, the possibilities, there's also this tendency or trend to, you know, just put always some video in, or some, you know, effects on whatever. And then to me, it's not the polyphony anymore. It needs to have this own integrity and its own meaning, that, you know, it could also, it wouldn't be the same. Maybe it would be a bit boring to have, you know, just one, you know, one thing without the other. But yeah, but there should be some red
dialogue or
or dialogue, or it just coherency.
Mm-hmm. Wow, Sarah, thank you so much for all of your thoughts. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you and hearing about your musical work. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your interest in my work and for chatting. And
my pleasure. And I hope that everyone who tuned in, some of your recordings are actually on IDAGIO, and I was listening to them today. So definitely listen to those.
Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much, and I'm wishing you all the very best from this side of Berlin to your side of Berlin.
Yeah, wishing you too, and all the best, and hoping for spring now when the snow melts.
Exactly, the snow is already melting here, so please take care. Thank you, and thank you to everyone else who tuned in today, and I will see you again next week. So
okay.